It is.
You just speak out.
Let's speak. Okay.
No,
All right, tonight I'd like to introduce Katie Dillon, the Community Relations of the Life Center here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And also, we've got a kidney transplant patient. His name is Kevin Reynolds. And also, I'm a straight pancreas transplant patient. So we're going to have him both give their behalves, what she does for Life Center, and he's going to give his story.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much. I've got applause, but I didn't even do anything yet. Thank you. That's great. Good way to start. I'm Katie Dillon. I'm the Community Relations Manager for Life Center, which is an organ procurement organization here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are responsible for the recovery of organ and tissue for transplant. We're also responsible for promoting organ and tissue donation because it saves so many lives. Right now in the United States, we have about 115,000 people who are waiting on a life-saving organ transplant. And we have about 30,000 people every year who benefit from this, whose lives are saved from somebody saying yes. It's a really simple thing to do when you get that driver's license or when you renew that driver's license, to say yes to that question and to potentially help save or enhance somebody else's life. And whether you donate organs or whether you donate tissue or cornea, you are making a huge difference. For the more than 1 million people who receive tissue for transplant every year, they have increased mobility. It saves the lives for folks who are, experiencing severe burns, and it also gives new sight to people who need cornea transplants. So it's a really wonderful gift to give. Tonight, you're going to have a really great treat to hear from two folks who have been directly affected by that and directly touched by that. And with that, I'll introduce Larry to share his story. Or which one of you wanted to go first? Kevin. We'll have Kevin share his story first. As a Donate Life ambassador, Kevin's going to tell his story and his connection to donation. Thanks.
I always know when I'm talking in a church because the first row is always empty. Thanks for having us here. So yes, I'm an ambassador. Basically, I'm a volunteer. I do some speaking on behalf of Life Center. And what they asked me to do is just tell you my story. My story, though, involves a second person, and her name is Susie. And I'll tell you about Susie in a minute. So I was diagnosed in the late 1990s with something called polycystic kidney disease, and it's just what it sounds like. I was having a lot of cysts growing on my kidneys, and I was seeing a doctor, and we were taking care of it. What we neglected to discover until it was too late was that amongst all of those cysts that were growing, there was a lot of cancer growing as well. And in most cases, if a person gets kidney cancer, you get it on one kidney. I like to proclaim myself as an overachiever, and I got it on both at the same time. So my doctor wanted to try to save one of my kidneys, if he could, or at least some kidney function. So he sent me to Vanderbilt University down in Nashville to a specialist, a big time, like this guy teaches and trains. And he said, he looked at all my pictures and he said, yeah, let's give this a shot. And apparently, obviously I was sound asleep, within seconds of opening me up, he went, nope, everything's coming out. So there was a lot of cancer that had built up, so they took out that kidney and my adrenal gland. I healed up for 2 months and had to make a decision. The cancer in my second kidney was mostly internal as opposed to external. And they said, we can go in and cut your kidney open and take out the cancer cells. The problem is, if we miss even a single cell, it will begin to reproduce itself. And what the problem there is you have to prove yourself 5 years cancer-free before you can get a transplant. So he said, if that cell that we may accidentally miss starts to reproduce, we'll have to do another surgery, and then you have to start your 5-year clock again. So the decision was made, and it was not fun, but it was a decision that I think paid off in the end. Just get me cancer-free. take it out, let's start the clock. So I began 5 years of mandatory dialysis. If any of you have seen or been witness to anybody on dialysis, I really don't recommend it. It's a hard road to hoe. I did home hemodialysis, which means I had a small version of the machine you see in a hospital center or a freestanding center. And learned, my wife at the time and then myself, learned how to place 2 big needles in my arm every day, 5 days a week, 4 hours at a time to clean my blood to keep me alive. The good news about doing the home system was I worked full time. So I'd work from about 8 till about 4:30. I'd come home, we'd get the machine set up, we'd have dinner as a family, and then I'd go sit on the machine for 4 hours. It was an interesting way to live a life. So now I flip back just a bit. Right before I went to Nashville for that first surgery, I did what I think any cancer patient facing major surgery would do, is I threw a big party for myself. And I invited all my friends because I didn't know what was going to happen. And not that it was a farewell party by any means, but when you're in that situation, you want to sort of have a touch base with everybody before you start whatever this journey was going to be. So during the course of the party, my friend, Susie, came up to me at one point, and between you and I, we might have had a couple of cocktails as we were kind of getting ready for this. And she said, all right, tell me exactly what's going to happen. And I'd been telling that story quite a bit that night. So I told her basically what I told you. I've got to get one out. I'll probably have to have the other out. I have to stay cancer-free for 5 years on dialysis, and that's a lot of things that have to go right. Then I can get a transplant. And she looked at me, and I'd known Susie at that point for quite a while. She said, all right, I'll be your donor. And I'm like, you know, I love you to death, I do. I can't even begin to think about a donation. I have a lot that I need to get through. She didn't let it go. So, not too long after that, she started doing some research on being an organ donor and found out that the weight she had gained would make her ineligible. Her body mass index was way off the range. So Susie, being Susie, and this is one of several examples of Susie being Susie, she went to Jenny Craig, and within 1 year had lost 104 pounds. She became their before and after picture model in the window of their store, and even got written up in the Huffington Post about this. She joined a gym. She was going to get healthy. And please remember, this whole time, she has absolutely zero idea if she'll be a match for me. But she had faith. And she was convinced that this was her calling. So, I continue on with my 5 days a week treatment, and it's slow going, but every 6 months I go and get a cancer screen just to make sure there's no reoccurrence, and they were all clean. Susie was getting impatient. She was now all healthy and like all full of herself. She's like, come on, let's do this. And I went, I still have 3 years to go. You've got to slow down. We got to 4.5 years. I was still cancer-free. My doctor said, because everything has gone so well, if you have some people to test as potential donors, we'll go ahead and let you start now so that once you hit 5 years, we can go. Great. So I was fortunate. I had 3 people test for me. Now what's different with that versus the number you heard Katie mention before, I didn't have to go on the wait list. The wait list is large. Of that 115,000 that she mentioned, about, and I'm just guessing, but it's right around 90,000 are waiting for kidneys.
Closer to 100 now.
Is it closer to 100 now? So I was fortunate that I had people who were willing to test for me. And of course I had Susie, who was relentless on the fact that she was going to be my donor. So they get tested. I know nothing of this. They keep everything secret. But I found out that she and my former brother-in-law were both matches. So I'm like, all right, this is pretty good. Now I'm nervous because if Susie doesn't get to do it, I don't know what she's going to do with herself, because this is what she's been focusing on for almost 5 years. My former brother-in-law happens to be a Covington City police officer. So on the scale of what's a good career to have if you're going to live with one kidney, that's not a good one. That's, and I told him that I didn't want him to be my donor because he's getting shot at, and I don't want him to lose his good kidney. And I certainly don't want to be responsible for him having to wind up on dialysis. Well, as it turned out, I get a phone call at my office in December of 2011 from Susie, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just working. What are you doing?" She goes, "Apparently I'm going to be your kidney donor." And I started crying. So we then started a bunch of tests. They really make sure that you are healthy physically and mentally before you go through this kind of operation. We got through all of those, thumbs up. March of 2012, I had my 5-year cancer screen come back clean. So they said, "You guys are all set. May, we're going to do the transplant." I am ecstatic because I'm finally going to be off the machine. Susie, not so much. And this is, again, another example of Susie. She called the transplant team and said, "You know, he's been on the machine now for like almost 5 years. Can't you move this up sooner than 2 months from now?" And they're like, "Are you serious?" She goes, "Yeah, I think we need to do this faster." And this is a person who's willing to undergo a major surgery and is like pushing for it to happen sooner. So the transplant team talked to the surgeons, and one surgeon said, "Yeah, I've got an opening on a day when I'm supposed to be at UC Hospital. I'll come over to Christ and do it then." So you all are part of the celebration that today is my 6th anniversary with my new kidney, with Susie's beautiful kidney. April 19th, 2012, we met in the parking garage at Christ Hospital, and I said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" She goes, "Shut up, let's just do it. It's been 5 years." And since then, I have lived a very healthy, active life. I volunteer with Life Center. I volunteer with a youth theater group in Northern Kentucky. I volunteer at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. I volunteer with people working cooperatively. I embrace what I do. I love that I have this second chance to do things. And I love that I had a Susie in my life. So our message to you, our message every time we go out is, please be registered as a donor. Please make sure your family knows what your wishes are as a donor. It can make a difference that you can't even begin to imagine. No matter how I explain it to you, it never really feels like I fully get across what that gift has meant to me, what it has meant to my life and the opportunities that I've been presented. I hope that you all have a Susie in your life. And more importantly, I hope that you all are a Susie in somebody else's life. So thanks for the time. Thanks for listening. And I appreciate all of you being here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Larry McGonigal, and just want to let you know that I'm a straight pancreas transplant patient. 43 years ago this September, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and back in 1975. And I had it for 30 years. And during my 30 years of having diabetes, I went through major complications, such as diabetic retinopathy, which would happen to my vision. I came down with legally blind, but I do have some visual left. I can see all. And also hypoglycemia unawareness, where I don't know if you ever had low blood sugars, but mine went down to 0 back in 2001. And it was a matter of 3 to 4 minutes, I would have been a goner. Paramedics had to cut my shirt open, ended up in the hospital for 2 days, didn't know what day it was, so I'm lucky to be alive. So October of 2004, I went on the straight pancreas transplant list, and 8 months later, I got the first call, which was a cross match, and some patient ahead of me got it, and I didn't give up. So 2 days later, on the 6th of June, I received another call, and they asked me if I was interested, and I said yeah. So I went over to UC Hospital, and they said it was coming in from out of town. So at 5 o'clock in the evening, that's when the young healthy pancreas arrived, and at 7 o'clock, they wheeled me down really quickly to the OR, and I heard Bruce Springsteen playing in the OR that my surgeon was playing. And I woke up early the next morning on the 6th of June and found out that it was a young, healthy pancreas. It was producing lots of insulin, and I was in the hospital for a week, got out, and I went through, I had about a month after my transplant, I had this dream that this little girl saved my life. My younger brother Doug and I were crossing over the Ohio River, and we're on this long wooden beam, and going across the Ohio River, and I look behind me, my brother Doug he disappears. I didn't get over, there was no way to go back to Ohio. So I continued my journey over to Kentucky, and I looked below me, there's this big long wooden beam, and it got cut off. So there's no way, I was stuck in midair above the deep waters of the Ohio River, and I was afraid I might drown, you know. So I looked below me, there was a big long wooden beam that was connected to the this island that was surrounded by the deep waters of the Ohio River, and I started shimmying down and looked on the side of my corner of my right eye, and I saw this big white Cadillac pull up, and this little girl with sandy blonde hair gets out and grabs my hand, pulls me over safety, so I won't drown. So her dad gets out and says, "What am I doing to her daughter?" I said, "Your daughter saved my life." Until this day, I truly believe my young healthy pancreas came from a little girl, and I named my young healthy pancreas Bethany. And I'm enjoying life to its fullest. I met the love of my life, Kathy, who's sitting right next to me. We met in 2009, and October 30th of 2010, Mayor Dan Polycastro married us. I've been really active ever since, and I've been in lots of 10K races and 5K races. In fact, I'm thinking about doing the 5K or the 10K Flying Pig coming up in a couple weeks. Then I'm going to do the Hyde Park Class, and I came in first place in the men's visually impaired 2008, and last year came in third place in the SDK walk. So I truly believe that my young healthy pancreas came from a little girl, and I never met that family that donated donated organs that saved my life, and I'm enjoying life to its fullest. And I encourage every one of you tonight to sign up and become an organ tissue donor, because it can save up to 8 lives. In fact, Chris Henry from the Bengals, he saved 6 lives. And there's my speech for you last time.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, is there any questions anyone might want to pose? Go ahead.
I don't know if they've got this program here in Cincinnati, but we have friends are actually in Wisconsin, Appleton, and she is on the transplant list there, okay? And what they have there, right now she's in the process of going to like her sisters and everything like that, and her husband, to see if they're matches, okay? But if they're not matches for her, okay, they will take her, whoever the donor is, that kidney, and then they will place her at the top of the list for the next kidney that comes in that's a match for her. So I don't know if they have that here or not, but that's a great program. You know, if it's not a match, then you donate, whoever that donor is, donates the kidney, and then the person that needs the kidney, the spouse or whoever it is, goes to the top of the list until one comes in for, it's a match for that. So I think that's a great program, but that's not here.
Well, we do actually have kidney chains that are happening here. We do have paired donation that's happening here through Christ and through UC. They both have great living donation programs where they can actually, because that's pretty common, where if you have a person who wants to be your donor, but they're not quite a match,
then
they can actually pair them to another person, and then that person's match could go to you. So,
okay, I think that's a great program.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that'll, you know,
Yeah,
as long
it
as
helps
you
to
got-
save a
if
lot
you
of
got
lives.
friends or whoever's
Absolutely.
willing to do it, it's not a match, then,
Yeah,
you know, instead of waiting for a long, long
Yeah.
time, you know, like,
yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, earlier today, I was at a flag raising for Donate Life in Hamilton, and one of my fellow ambassadors, Olivia, and they call it an altruistic donor. She heard a story about somebody here in the region who needed a kidney. Somebody else was a better match, but the hospital said, would you be part of the chain? And she's like, sure. She wound up donating a kidney to a young wannabe mother in Los Angeles. Her husband then donated to somebody else, and actually Olivia was the start of an 8 transplant chain that probably wouldn't have happened because somebody had to be willing to, yeah, you have to have an altruistic, like, she didn't care who it went to, she wanted it to go to somebody who needed it. And that's what kicks off a chain like that, so.
And just recently, she found out that her recipient is going to be a mom. So, yeah. Good stuff. Any other questions? Great questions.
You know, the designation that's on our driver's license, you know, being an organ donor kind of thing, I think we still have that in the state.
Yep.
What kind of a donor does that actually make us?
So when you register on your driver's license, you're registering to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor, meaning you can donate any of those items if they're able to be used in transplant. If you wanted to designate anything differently, you could also alter that. So whether it's when you renew or whether it's through an online or through a form, you can alter that. So if for some reason you say, you know, I'm not comfortable with donating a cornea, or I'm not comfortable with donating X, Y, or Z, you can actually specify that. Most people choose to donate whatever can be used, just because it doesn't alter the way you look. Like, you can still have a normal funeral, it doesn't change anything. And also, if you have, a lot of people will try to take themselves out of the registry because of medical conditions, for example, cancer or diabetes or anything like that. They say, oh, well, I can't be an organ donor anymore, I'll take myself off the registry, which is actually something that they don't have to do, because you never know what you could potentially donate. So we tell everybody to register, regardless of age, regardless of medical conditions, because it's at the time of the death that we'll be able to assess what we can and can't donate. So you don't have to worry about taking yourself out. Yeah, question back.
Okay, so that brings up a question for you that in 2008, I was diagnosed with stage 4 tonsil cancer. Was not expected to survive.
Yeah.
I did. And now I didn't do anything but lay there sick. It was the good Lord above that took care of me. But they told me I could never be an organ donor. I can't give blood, anything, because I had cancer.
Yeah.
But I'm 10 years out now.
And absolutely, so if you pass away today, you could absolutely donate organs. So I don't know who told you that, but they were totally wrong.
It was
I
my
do this
cancer
every day.
doctor 8
So,
years
yes.
ago, or 10
Yes.
years ago.
And that's actually a good example, because you never know, at that time, they might have had a restriction on 8 years or 10 years out or whatever, on how long you would have to wait to be able to be a donor. If you're 5 years cancer free, you're still able to donate organs if you die and you're able to donate organs, as long as you're 5 years clean, you're
Because
able
I'm
to
10 years
donate.
out now.
Yeah, so if you're not registered, please do so. I
That's
actually left
fabulous.
forms on the table in the back in the front area, so you can take that, fill out the form, mail that in, or go online, which the website's on there as well. So you can absolutely register.
Fabulous.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
great
good
question.
news.
Yeah.
That's good. Wow.
In the case of an unexpected death or heart attack, how does the hospital know? I mean, do they look at your driver's license?
Sure. So the way that it works, and actually to give some background, most organ donors are actually folks who have died due to a very specific form of death, which is called brain death. Brain death only happens in 1% of all cases, which is why it's really important to register as many people as possible. So out of that 100 people who might die, only one of them has the potential to actually donate organs due to that. And in that process, a lot of times that person's been at the hospital, they've already been at the hospital and been treated, and the hospital's doing everything that they can to help save their life. So they don't actually look at organ donation as a possibility until death is imminent, and or unless the family brings that up. So if the family approaches and they know that this is something that this person probably won't survive, and they want to ask about it, they can initiate that conversation. Otherwise, it doesn't happen until that death is imminent. And in that case, we actually have a registry that's online. So they don't look at the physical license, because a really good example would be if you didn't register when you got your license, but then you changed your mind and went online and registered, then your license wouldn't be reflecting what's accurate. So that's why we have all that database is actually housed in a secure site. So, yeah. Great question.
Is there an age limit on certain organs? I know, like you mentioned corneas and you mentioned skin,
Yeah.
but like, what would be like a heart or a liver or
Sure.
whatever, kidney?
We actually don't have age limits on donors,
Okay.
just because we never know what could be potentially healthy. I mean, we've walked away from 30 and 40-year-old organs because they're unhealthy,
Right.
whereas we've been able to transplant organs from a person who's up into their 80s.
Oh, okay.
In a lot of cases, though, with our older transplants,
Yeah.
they're going to somebody who's also an older recipient, just because that organ, is able
Right.
to have the longevity that person might
Person
need.
need, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So, do you take the organs out? The person dies, you take all the organs out and test them?
No, actually,
Okay.
so the process for donation happens in the hospital, and at the time of death, that's when we get notified, that's when we get called. If we get consent, we then go and start the testing at the hospital, but the person does not have that surgical procedure until we've matched everything up. And we can actually tell a lot just through blood tests and other tests that we perform to provide some information on the health of the organs and the matching process for that patient who's going to receive it.
You make
So
these
we're able to
tests
do all that before.
after death?
Yes. Yeah, so it's a very fast process because we're working against the clock. Once the brain dies, the body begins to shut down too. So even though this person's on mechanical support in a lot of cases, we still have about a 24 to 48 hour window that we're able to recover organs for transplant and use them for somebody else. So
What
it's
about
very
people
fast.
who aren't brain dead, though? I mean,
Yeah, that's actually, in the majority of cases for people who pass away, they're actually more likely to be able to be a tissue and a cornea donor. And in those cases, we don't need, blood pumping to the organs. We don't need that person's organs to be kept viable. So with tissue and with cornea, we're actually able to recover those on site. So a lot of times we coordinate with our funeral homes. And we're able to, between the hospital and the funeral home, we're able to have that person brought to our facility, we're able to do a recovery, and then again, the person still has the same appearance, because it's very important for that family, for a sense of closure. So they're able to then go to that funeral home and still have that. Good question. Yeah, hopefully that's clarifying. Yeah. I know it's not something that a lot of people think about, but it absolutely makes a huge difference in so many lives. So we really thank you guys for letting us share this and talk to you a little bit more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so